I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but recent events have forced me to confront my past and the painful reality of my present. For years, I buried memories deep inside, hoping they would fade away like morning mist. But life has a way of bringing buried truths to the surface, whether we're ready or not. My marriage of 6 years was falling apart, and it all started with a TV show. My wife had heard good things about a series called Baby Reindeer from our friends. I thought I could handle watching it, even knowing it dealt with themes of abuse and stalking. I convinced myself that I had moved past my childhood trauma. I was wrong. By the fourth episode, I found myself fighting back tears. By the fifth, I completely broke down. My wife paused the show and stared at me, confusion written across her face. In that moment, after years of silence, I finally told her everything. I told her about being 9 years old and the person who was supposed to watch over my little brother. I explained how this person had hurt me repeatedly, buying my silence with sweets and games, threatening my life if I ever spoke up. When I was 14, I finally understood what had happened to me, and I tried to tell my strict Catholic parents. That only led to more pain, my father's fists, my mother's punishment, both refusing to believe me. My friends weren't any better. The guys called me lucky, while the girls accused me of attention-seeking. After that, I promised myself I would never tell another soul. Until that night with my wife. At first, she seemed supportive. She hugged me, and we went to bed. But something changed after that. The small gestures of affection disappeared. No more welcome home kisses, no more intimate moments. She became distant, though she denied anything was wrong when I asked. Then came the argument that changed everything. What started as a trivial dispute about taking out the trash exploded into something much darker. In the heat of the moment, she spat words that felt like daggers. At least I'm not lying about being raped, you narcissist. I couldn't process what I had just heard. She tried to apologize immediately, but the damage was done. I grabbed some clothes and left for my friend Ryan's house. She called repeatedly, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. How could the person who was supposed to love me most in the world take my deepest wound and use it as a weapon? I spent that night on Ryan's couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how 6 years of marriage could crumble so quickly. My mind kept circling back to all the other times I tried to share my truth, only to be met with disbelief and ridicule. Was I destined to carry this burden alone forever? The next morning, feeling guilty about burdening Ryan with my marital problems and needing to get to work, I decided to return home. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would force me to confront not just my past, but also the harsh realities of my present. When I walked through our apartment door, I was met with screaming. My wife berated me for ghosting her and not having an adult conversation. I tried explaining how deeply her words had hurt me, how I needed space to process everything. She cut me off, calling me an immature crybaby and saying there was nothing to think about. After that, we barely spoke. I spent days wrestling with my thoughts, trying to convince myself that I could save our marriage. She wasn't perfect, but neither was I. My past had ruined previous relationships, and I desperately wanted this one to be different. Maybe I just needed to be stronger to handle people's disbelief better. After all, she wasn't the first person to react badly to my story. When we finally started talking again, I sat her down for a serious conversation. I opened up about the years of ridicule I'd endured, how her reaction had reopened those unhealed wounds. I even suggested couples therapy. That's when everything truly fell apart. She started crying, but not for the reason I expected. She pushed away my attempt to comfort her and screamed about how I could consider ending our marriage over a silly argument. According to her, I was making up a sob story after watching Baby Reindeer for attention and sympathy. She couldn't believe that if this had really happened, I would have kept it secret for 6 years. Through my own tears, I tried to explain, to apologize for keeping it hidden for so long. Her response was a slap across my face before she stormed off to bed. For the next week, I slept on the couch. Every attempt to talk was met with sarcastic comments and more storming off. Most nights, I cried myself to sleep, wishing I'd never watched that show, never opened up, never trusted her with my truth. But the reality was becoming clearer each day. The woman I'd fallen in love with, the one I thought would stand by me through anything, saw me as nothing more than an attention-seeking liar. Looking back, there had been red flags, but I'd ignored them all because, for once in my life, I felt loved. She hadn't called me gay for being unable to have sex right away in our relationship. She hadn't laughed at my occasional seizures. She had waited until marriage for intimacy, just like me. But now the facade was crumbling. The safe haven I thought I'd found was revealing itself to be just another prison of silence and shame. When she came home drunk one night and berated me for an hour straight, reality finally snapped into focus. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was okay while dying inside. I contacted a divorce lawyer secretly and began preparing my assets and accounts. When I finally told her about the divorce, her true colors emerged in full force. She sneered that I would never find anyone else willing to put up with a giant pussy who can't even admit he wanted whatever happened to him. According to her, no woman would ever want an attention-seeking crybaby like me. For a moment, her words almost broke my resolve. Almost. But then I remembered that drunk night, remembered the look of disgust on her face when I shared my deepest pain, remembered the sting of her slap. I knew I had to get out. I moved in with Ryan, thinking I was finally taking a step toward healing. But my wife wasn't done destroying what was left of my life. She started messaging all my friends, telling them I was making up stories about being raped. Worse, she claimed that she was actually the one filing for divorce because I had been physically abusive to her. Most of my friends, people I'd known for years, immediately turned against me. Messages poured in calling me a failure as a man, followed by blocks on all social media. Only Ryan stood by me, seeing through her lies. I was grateful I had moved away from the U.S. to Europe when I was 19 to live with my grandparents. At least she couldn't contact my parents to fuel more drama. I never even told her their names. But she found other ways to hurt me. She contacted the bank where I was doing my apprenticeship, sending them evidence of my supposed abuse. I don't even know what she wrote, but on the 20th, HR called me in for a meeting. They fired me on the spot, saying I wasn't worth the hassle. Just like that, I was back to doing construction work without proper education and almost completely alone. I feel numb now. Not angry, not sad, just empty. Every step forward seems to knock me 3 steps back. Sometimes I wonder if they're all right. Maybe I am unlovable and pathetic. Maybe I do deserve all of this. There's so much I never told anyone about what happened to me as a child. I left out the worst parts because they were too painful to share. But now, with nothing left to lose, maybe it's time to speak the whole truth. My abuser didn't just threaten my life, she tortured me. She violated me in ways that left me unable to walk properly, leading to ruthless bullying at school. She dressed me up and forced me to pose for her. She hurt me in ways that still haunt my nightmares. I know some people reading this might wonder why I'm even sharing this story. My wife already convinced everyone that I'm just seeking attention. But I need to believe that somewhere out there, someone might understand. Someone might believe me. Ryan keeps telling me that I'm stronger than I think, that I'll get through this. Some days I believe him, other days I'm not so sure. I've lost my wife, my friends, my job, and my dignity. But maybe, just maybe, by finally telling my whole truth, I can start to find myself again. I don't know what comes next. I'm still staying with Ryan, still trying to rebuild my life from scratch. The divorce proceedings are ongoing, and each day brings new challenges. But for the first time in my life, I'm not carrying these secrets alone anymore. Even if most people don't believe me, I stopped lying to myself. Maybe that's the first step toward healing. To anyone else out there carrying heavy secrets, wondering if they'll ever be believed, I see you. I believe you. And maybe someday we'll both find people who understand that our truth, no matter how painful, deserves to be heard. The construction work is hard, but it keeps my mind occupied. Ryan helps when he can, and I'm slowly learning to trust again, one tiny step at a time. It's not the life I imagined for myself, but it's a life where I can finally be honest about who I am and what happened to me. Maybe that's worth something after all.